you're setting the crack trainers, and today I'm going to show you 5 crack exercises to make you the strongest crack climbers in the world. The first exercise that we are going to look at is the shoulder bar and the arm bar. And these are 2 techniques that you'll use for slightly wider off-widths. They're quite like a power technique, so you have to use like a bit of push and a bit of force to actually get it to work. Me and Tom have done these exercises in the past on something called the Hastinator, which was a steep 40-degree off-width in Tom's cellar. Like you would do with fingerboarding, doing reps, we would do reps inside there, so you know, we would do 6 to 10 seconds on and then out, do your rest, and then 6 to 10 seconds on, out, and then your rest, and we would sort of do repeaters of arm bars to sort of work the same muscles you would use when you were arm barring in an off-width. So that's what we're going to work on here. So we're going to look at shoulder bars first, because this is the slightly easier variation. Now with a shoulder bar, you're looking at having your arm up in the crack like this, so palm against one side, and then side of the elbow and tricep against the other side. Usually in a crack, the crack would be a little bit deeper when you're doing this. Why we call it a shoulder bar is because when you put your arm in, actually you would be engaging your shoulder on the side. But the great thing about this is because it's so shallow, you don't get that shoulder engagement, so then you have to do extra pushing force. So then actually when you do a shoulder bar outside, it's going to feel much easier. With the feet, what we want to do is we want to pick a foothold. The bigger the foothold, the easier it is basically. The smaller the foothold, the more difficult it's going to be. For the example, I've got a really nice big ledge, so I don't fall off. But if you wanted to make it harder, you could use like a little screw on or a little smear, or if you wanted to make it harder still, you know, you could just be smearing on the wall, and that would be kind of totally desperate. I'm not sure if I could even do it, like trying to smear on the wall, but I can give it a go. So after we know how to do a shoulder bar, how to hold the position, a really simple and basic like reps and sets that we can do is just follow the generic fingerboard routine that a lot of people do, which is a 7-3. So 7 seconds on the wall in intensity, and then 3 seconds rest, and then 7 seconds on the wall in intensity, 3 seconds rest, and then do that for a minute, and then have a minute rest, and then repeat that 3 times. So that would be a set. You might end up doing about 3 sets of that, depending on how difficult you have the lower foothold. Because let's say, for example, we put a really small smear or screw on down here, then this would start to become really difficult. Okay, so an alternative to the shoulder bar is doing the arm bar. And now with arm barring, we're usually going into the crack in sort of this angle, but again, because it's quite shallow, we're having to go all the way down here, which makes it actually really hard to stay onto the crack, especially when it's like vertical like this. So for the arm bar, we're placing our arm in a downward position, palm flat against this wall and pushing, and then we're going elbow and tricep against this wall here. For this exercise, I wouldn't really look at doing repeaters just because it's so kind of intensive. I would more look at it like a strength exercise. So rather than a repeater exercise where you're going on and then off and then on and off, more a strength exercise where you're holding the position, it's a max hold, and you're probably falling off right at the end, and then you're having a good long rest, and then you're going for it again. So I would look at trying to do 5-second hang, hold that 5 seconds, I'd be failing at the end, and then I'd be looking at having to, you know, like 1 to 2 minute rests so that I can actually, you know, have another proper good go again. So I actually find this exercise really difficult, but I'm gonna give it a go now. I could well fall off. I'm gonna go for 5 seconds, just go all out, balls out. Here we go. Oh, that was about 2.5. But that's hard. I need some chalk and timer. See, these are also actually really good to place your phone. That's designed. Okay, round 2. Here we go. Oh, there you go. This is more like your equivalent to max hangs on a fingerboard. One way of making the exercise easier is to use your hand on the edge like you would in an off-width. So into the armbar position, hand on the edge and hold it. And what you could do with that, if that feels too easy, you could make the wall a little bit steeper. If you want to make it easier again, rather than holding this, you could hold this one in this direction. What we can do is we can start to use other parts of our body which aren't quite as good as that other arm. and one I like to use is my face. So what we'll do, we'll get into the armbar position. It's useful to use this to get into the position. And then what we'll do, we just squeeze our cheek inside, like this. And then we're pushing with our cheek against one side of the crack. I'm not really getting much friction out the back of my head, but just out the cheek and the nose. Okay, and then we're in. 5 seconds. Oh, and then out. And that's like a little intermediate. The good thing about this is you won't get any abrasion on your face because it's soft grip, so you don't have to do any cheek taping. So there we go. Number 1 in the bag. Okay, so we have put the crack trainer at a sort of hand-fist stack, hand-hand stack type width. And what we are going to do for the next exercise is a calf lock trainer exercise. So a calf lock width of crack is kind of this width. So you have your hands in the crack like this. You have a high leg in the crack with your foot and your leg jamming in there. And what makes this width of crack really difficult is the fact that you can't get your leg all the way in, so the crack edge is only coming up to here, and you're always having to do really big sit-ups to actually reach into the stacks, and it actually becomes really core intensive. So this exercise is quite tricky, so I'm going to show you a really easy version, or an easier version to start you off. And for this you don't actually need any other footholds, you just need the crack trainer on the wall, because what we're going to do is we're going to start off stood on the floor. We're going to have our foot in the crack in a sort of frogged foot position, and then we're going to have our other foot, like I said, on the ground to start with to make it a bit easier. So with the frogged foot, we're putting our foot in the crack and we're rotating it inwards. So we've got this part and this part of our foot engaged on either crack wall. So when we put it in, putting it in and twisting it like that. And then when we come down, we want to come all the way down to this position and then all the way up into the crack, all the way down, all the way up and all the way down. The further you stand back, the easier it is. The further you stand into the wall, the more difficult it is on this leg, and also the more difficult it is to sit up. And obviously that gets me on the left hand side a bit more, so you want to swap feet, you want to do it on the right side, and you're going to work the right side a little bit more. Even though it might feel difficult to reach all the way into the crack because your leg is quite shallow, you want to aim to actually do that, because then when you go out on the rock and on routes which require this technique, it's going to feel really easier, the crack is going to feel much closer. Aim for that, and it's alright to bend the leg, to bring your hands in. If you can't do that, reach the crimps on the side, and if you can't do that, just touch and lean back and touch. So like I said, this exercise is actually really good to have your bottom foot on the floor and just move it inwards depending on your ability and your strength in the core. If you want to make it really hard, you can actually start putting a foothold on the wall. I'm going to try it on this. I personally think it's totally desperate. Squeezing really hard, back and in, back. So there you go, that's something to work up to. Okay, so we're going to look at exercise 3, and this is more of practicing a technique and then incorporating a strength related exercise within it. We're going to look at knee locking alongside a core exercise. So for this exercise you're going to need some kind of weight and your crack trainer at a knee lock width. So for a knee lock, we're putting this part of our leg into the crack and we're pulling our leg out, and this is expanding this, and that's going to make us stick inside the crack. The exercise that we're going to do, we're going to get ourselves into a knee lock, and then I'm just going to again use a nice big foothold at the bottom, and we're going to use our weight and we're just going to do side to side crunchies. So the first thing that we want to do, get our weight, get our crack, and hop on. Knee lock in. There you go. What you'll notice with this is one side will feel easier than the other side. If you have your left leg in and you're rolling this way, it's going to start to lock that knee in. Then as you go the other way, you're going to have to tense more with your core because it's rolling the knee outwards and not locking it in as well. If you were doing the opposite leg, so the right leg, it would be the opposite. If you come in that way, a little bit more relaxing, and then outwards, you have to tense a little bit more. I think for this exercise, the amount of sets and reps you do is just really kind of applicable to your needs. So if you have an off-width project, which is a boulder problem, for example, and you have a really hard sit-up move or a side move to get into the crack, then you might want to do less reps and have a heavier weight. If your project is kind of a long off-widthing knee lock section, it's just working the core in endurance sense, then you might want to do more reps at a lower weight. So I would say just tailoring it to your project for this exercise is a really good idea. Okay, so for the next exercise, exercise number 4, we are going to need either 2 crack trainers, which is preferable, or some extra handholds. You want the 2 crack trainers at just under like full arm span away. And what we're going to do here is we're going to simulate how you transfer from a hold, a crimp, a crack, and then into a crack. Because these are always quite tricky moves, actually going sideways into another crack. So I'm just going to show you a little exercise which can simulate that movement and basically make it easier. So we're going to start with both hands in the left hand crack, and to move over to this crack here, we want to have opposite hand to foot. So we're going to have left hand in here, we're going to have right foot on our foothold, and to get into the crack, we're not just going to stab straight into the crack, we're going to hold the edge of the crack. We're going to swap feet. If it's quite stretched like this one, you might go edge of the crack, jam. And then this move here is where people often struggle, and they'll often come and they'll be swinging and want to swing in, they'll swing away from the crack. But what we want to do, without even swapping feet, taking our left foot off, inside flag, and then over into a thumbs down jam. And then to move back, right hand, left foot, back over to the left hand crack, feet across. It's a little bit of a stretch, so to the edge of the crack, and then into your hand jam, inside flag, and then coming across. And then swap feet, back across, throw into your jam, inside flag, and across. So a really simple way of making this exercise easier would be to move your crack trainer inwards, and you can move straight from a jam to a jam, and that eliminates having to hold both sides of the crack, and it eliminates having to be so stretched out between the cracks. If you wanted to make it harder, you could just make the jams a little bit harder, so you maybe use a thin hand jam. So you're going from thin hand into thin hand. Again, you could make the footholds a little bit worse, move the crack trainers apart. A few examples to make it harder and easier. Last exercise, exercise 5. So we're going to look at a jamming pump to crimp normal face climbing pump. Because what is really difficult with crack climbing is when you get really pumped in your thumb from doing lots of jamming, and then you suddenly have to do some like crimpy, hard face climbing moves right at the end of a pitch when you're already pumped. After this is really pumped in your thumb, it's just really hard to go back to that crimping and open-handed normal type grip position. This is a really simple exercise, but all we're doing is setting the crack at the desired width. So to get a thumb pump, you're going to want it at thin hand, normal hand, or cupped hand type of width. If you're setting it at fist jam width, you're not really going to get that thumb pump. And all we're going to do is we're going to climb around on the crack trainer with our hands, and then we're going to go onto the outside of the crack trainer, and using the holds on the outside in any kind of way. I would say for this kind of thing, to actually get a thumb pump rather than fall off because it's too hard, you want to be aiming to be climbing around on the crack, I would say for 5 minutes. So aim for a 5-minute time, climbing around on the crack to get a desired thumb pump. If you're not as competent on crack climbing, you might just keep your feet on the floor and literally just moving your hands around like this for 5 minutes might get you a desired thumb pump. If you're more experienced in crack climbing, you might want to set this at a much steeper angle or in a roof, and you might be just moving your hands around for 5 minutes before then going on to the holds on the outside. When you move on to the holds on the outside, you then want to aim for around a minute on these holds. And what I tend to do is just use a variety of different grip positions. So I might just use crimping, I might use 3-finger open handing, I might go to a jug, I might go to just one pad, but you can use all parts of the crack trainer. You know, you could pinch on these, you could hold a jug at the top, layaways, crossovers, you know, anything you want to do, but you're just replicating that movement of going from jams to normal face holds. So aim for 5 minutes in the crack, 1 minute on the holds afterwards. So to make the exercise a little bit more interesting, if you do have more crack trainers, it's really nice to actually just stack a few on top of one another or put some from side to side so you can move between crack trainers or up and down. It just makes it a little bit more interesting. So you can do the exercise with one, but to make it a little bit more interesting, you might want to, you know, use 2. So that is 5 different exercises, which is guaranteed to make you a better crack climber. If you are obviously interested in doing any of these exercises at home and want a crack trainer, then you can get hold of one in our Wide Boyz shop, and all the info for the Wide Boyz shop and the crack trainers is in the description below this video.